Thanks very much. I'm going to try and speak about things different to what I wrote. It would be boring if I repeated what I'd already written. Um, and here, before we start, I want to make a claim because I think as early as 2022 at a CU talk, I did say that I think China will overtake US in terms of GPUs, not in terms of the consequences and artificial intelligence, but in terms of what it builds as graphical processor units. So I think our prediction was correct, although at the time I was basing this on a tender that I was involved in and the details that we got from China in terms of their GPUs. This was a year after NVIDIA had stopped selling its latest, not just the H100s, but its latest GPUs to China. And they came up with a proposal in terms of GPUs made in China superior to what we had experienced in terms of NVIDIA. And at the time, I remember I consulted others, non-technical people, because on technical sides, there was no doubt. So I think I spoke to Mike McNair and asked him, do you think the institution involved would consider a deal with China? And he cited various reasons why this will not go ahead. I also consulted an expert in China in Cambridge University, and he's a very nice guy, I assume for saving me because he's quite pro-China, but in order to save my career, he said, don't touch it, don't do it, it will not work. But I want to start by saying why IT is in a bad state in capitalism. And I would say that the state of IT is riddled by waste, riddled by incompetence. And all of this makes one wonder how all this will work in terms of the aims and ambitions of these states. So typically in an IT company in the West and between the two ivory towers of Glasgow University and Oxford, I have worked in the private sector, very short time, but it was an eye-opener. You've got a hierarchy that reflects management in capitalist structures. So you have the CEO of most companies, but if you look at any company, you have bigger, larger companies, airlines, banks, insurance companies. You would have someone who is called a CTO. He's the central technical officer, and he's in charge of technical stuff. And he and the CEO travel around the world, and people tell them, oh, we've automated this, that, or the other. And this is not just AI. This is at least the last 2 decades. And they come back and say, oh, why can't we automate this? And they employ people, they get people to work for them. And you have what is called an IT team or teams within IT. Below them, you have all these professions that capitalism has created. Maybe China has them, I don't know, but at least in US and UK, there is a whole set of professions: business analysts, project managers, testers, operators, and so on. And they constitute 75 to 80% of this IT department. And it's no longer called computer service because it's information technology. So it can involve all sorts of different people with different levels of understanding of what is tech actually involved. And this has ballooned out of proportion. They're all very good at using computing jargon, acronyms, words. But they're not actually doing any work. They are managing, supposedly, or if you like, organizing the work of code writers. These are people who are either in-house or contract workers, and they are less than 20% of this IT department. And of course, you have huge salaries for both the CTOs, this army of business analysts, project managers. They've done what I would call really superficial, unnecessary courses, maybe as diplomas, maybe as MScs, or maybe as professional training courses after a degree, and they are doing this project management. Most of the work they do, in my opinion, and I'm sure there are those who will disagree, is completely redundant. This whole growth of this industry, this paraphernalia, came about because code writers are often autistic, semi-autistic, good ones. They can't express themselves well. So this layer of businessman, analyst, project manager, CTO is supposed to then produce general terms or understandable words for the work, the real works that the code writer does. Very often, they don't know much about how the code is written. They definitely don't know much mathematics. They don't understand how long a job will take. And therefore, the code writer can tell them anything and they have to accept it. Nowadays, they've added this thing called, and in fact, even when I was in the industry, we worked under what was called agile, and that has added its own jargons, its own diagrams. But the fundamental issue remains basic ignorance about what is involved, how it is done, and huge expenses, millions, billions spent on IT, not just by capitalist companies, by governments. UK is famous. You've all heard of Capita during Blair's. There is more than that particular project that faced a problem. And the code writers are very clever. They don't tell the emperor he's not wearing any clothes because it's not in their interest to do so. They just go along, do their work. Depending on how conscientious they are, they might give a better, more accurate, less accurate timescale. But this growth of IT companies is really a bubble. It's quite a lot of it is a complete waste of money. And that's why, in addition to the technical capabilities of the GPUs in China, no one should be surprised that Deepseek claims $6 million expenditure allowed it to do. I don't believe it. I'm sure the Chinese government subsidized some of this, but it did not spend billions and billions. It certainly didn't spend trillions. And in a way, irrespective of whether we believe that they used old A100 chips or they've used their own chips together, their own GPUs together with the older American ones, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you can have these very fast H100 GPUs, but if your code is rubbish, it will take ages for it to catch what an A100 can do. And sloppy code writing, bad code writing, relying on artificial intelligence to write code, which everyone knows is bad, is not bad, it works, but it's slow, is the result of this kind of waste of IT. So if you look at, for example, the debate about the prices of what the US stopped China buying in 2020 and the price of them. So the A100 is The current price is about 18,000 to 20,000 for an 8 gigabytes. That is kind of the top of what an A100 can do. You can buy time using it in the cloud, but if you buy times, then you're paying £19 or around £19 per hour, and you're paying $12,000 per month, $13,000 per month to use one GPU. Now you need, depending on what you're doing for AI, you would need thousands of these, tens of thousands of these. So you can see that the budget can go up. For an H100, which has far more memory and is faster, and the company, like on phones or televisions or anything else, will tell you, as soon as you complain that something isn't working, you say, oh, but you're not on the latest model. The latest model is 25,000 per GPU, and it can, if you've got an H100 on a bigger box, you can be paying 400,000 for one of these, not for one box of these. So obviously, this is the price that a lot of companies pay for that. Universities get it a lot cheaper, especially if they allow their logo. Some universities' logos are obviously more valuable than others, but if you sell your logo as well, you can get them cheaper. But the reality is that none of this AI work is magic. None of it is that strange. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to try and go through some of the things that make it work. And then I'll share a screen about how data about tens of thousands of patients was used in the testing of vaccines, and how the testing of that vaccine allowed its, if you like, learning from that experience allowed to use it. And it's a real example. I haven't made it up. So basically, all of this relies on a language called Python. And if you like, if you're looking at it like a kindergarten, let's look at it like a child in a kindergarten. Python is basically the classroom. It's where the interaction takes place, where the teacher is, the students, the computer is. The teacher is the human, and the computer is the child. And you use a number of tools. People throw them about left, right, and center. Most people who use these terms haven't a clue what they do. But you have something like NumPy. It basically is data. It's where you write, you have tables, you write how many pages there are, how many, you can define things in terms of their size, their color, and you create tables. Then you have something like pandas that allows you to organize this data. So all of your data is is defined in terms of size and importance and so on, and given a score, so to speak. Then you have the teacher. The teacher is what I refer to in the article as well, PyTorch. And the teacher is responsible to tell the classroom how to understand the data in the NumPy and prepare and arrange the information to make it easy to learn. The model is the student, is the child, and that allows it to recognize all sorts of data, for example, animals, for example, colors, within this table. And that's it. That is what it uses to run the program. Now, there is a lot more once you go beyond teaching a child to differentiate, as someone put it, between cats and dogs. That's when you need a lot more mathematics. And in a way, the advantage of this AI is that it has been given a lot of mathematics, a lot of code in NumPy, but also a lot of basic mathematics, and it is good at resolving that. It is not good at writing code. It fails, and very often, it doesn't fail, sorry. It does write a code, but it's not the best of codes. It's very often what I would call slack code writing. But it is good at explaining other people's errors. It's good at telling you why something has gone wrong. Okay, so this was a mathematical approach for predicting vaccine effectiveness, and it did use a very large, I've only put 100,000, but it actually used a lot of information. So the maths is in creating the matrices and then being able to use logistics to understand what the maths does. So you give it factors in terms of how important is the vaccine dosage, how important is the level of response, and so on. And you then have more difficult training model mathematics. Some of it is more complicated. Basically, this is the data about a vaccine. So there are different factors that 100,000 patients have to be classified. You are doing a classification of these. You give a model of them. Then for each of the factors that you have up there, age, pre-existing conditions, whatever, you give a bias, and that bias is calculated, and then you calculate probabilities in terms of the maths. Yeah, it's I won't bore you with the maths, but that's how then, once you have this data, you convert it into those models that I told you. So you put the numbers in one way, you add the evaluation of the effectiveness. In a Python code, you start the effectiveness in terms of what it does, and this is it. The program starts taking into account all the factors you've put there: age, pre-existing conditions, immune response, and so on. Then you have these libraries. These libraries are basically pre-written code, and there are dozens of versions of them. It depends what you use. Some are well written, some are not so well written. And remember that this AI has now become everyone's game. So it's not just computer experts who want to use this. In Oxford, the medical school is one of the largest users of AI. And the example I've taken is from the medical school. And you see how they then have to write the code and do the calculations. Now, because they're not mathematicians, because they're not experts in code writing, 9 out of 10 people will then use codes that somebody else has written. We refer to it occasionally as dirty needles. Dirty needles because the original one wasn't very good. Maybe it was 2 years old. Maybe people hadn't learned about new libraries, new versions of code, and so on. And it's passed on. And it's understandable. If you're in a hurry to create a model, that's what you do. But this doesn't make it a good way of writing code. And as a result of this, in many ways, what happens depends on how you use these libraries, what kind of libraries people have written. And very often, you might get people who use the latest version of an H100 using all this stuff that I showed you, but the results they get is worse than someone using even their own laptop if it's got a GPU in it. So it's not the hardware, contrary to what IT managers would want to tell you. It's not the business analyst, it's not the project manager, it's the way a code writer converts mathematics to efficient computing code that determines how advanced you are. And unfortunately, capitalism hasn't done very good in that way. There are many problems with the way capitalism has, in my opinion, created wasted opportunities, wastes of these things, that it's not beneficial to humanity, it's wasteful of capabilities and so on. Now, on another, I won't show the screen how one writes that kind of thing. I want to then say what's good and what's bad. As you can see here, I've got both, if I can, I don't know if this screen is shown well, but I've got both ChatGPT and Deepseek. And I want to tell you what's good in either of them. And in general, and that's only based on my own experiment, they both do the same kind of thing, and they have both the same problems. So the problems they have in terms of code writing is that they do go for the minimum possible reverberations of what is needed for a program. However, they are very good, and this is true of both of them, they're very good at helping someone who has got a mistake. So imagine you've written this code that I've shown you. You are running this code maybe on 20 different data sets, so you have 20 times 100,000. And you are running this for a year or a few months, and you're getting results from that. Of course, it does matter if the GPU you're using is very slow, but it's not the determining factor. The determining factor at the end of the day will come at how good you used that data, how much of the mathematics was good, how much of the code was used. And they're not good at code writing, they are good at mathematics. I would say in mathematics and physics, they have been fed huge data. They know how to calculate, they know how to do maths. They can help you with especially if you make a mistake in writing a formula or a mathematical equation, they're good at that. Once you go into social science, politics, and so on, things become more of an issue. And here I'm going to try, I think on Deepseek, I asked it, you can still see my screen, yeah? I did ask it about the Iranian Revolution of 1979, and I asked the same question from ChatGPT, and the answers were different. I should say that in terms of code, in terms of mathematics, Deepseek is more informative and gives you more choice than ChatGPT. But in terms of political questions, they are more biased in terms of their politics. So what can you tell me about the Iranian Revolution 1979? It will go and think, and I'm going to try, oops, sorry. So it tells you it is thinking. It will give you what it has found and then write the background, which I think is a more clever way than ChatGPT that just gives you the information. So I'm going to ask the same questions, then I will compare So this is the university's version of ChatGPT. It's not the free version. And you see it immediately, without even telling you where it's got this, it starts telling you the summary. While Deepseek went and tried to find more information before giving you the significance.
Yasmin, could you zoom into this one a little bit more? It's very difficult to read anything.
Oh, sorry. I think this is more difficult because, yeah. Is that any better?
Bit better, yeah, but yeah, well, can't be helped, I think.
I think it's a bit difficult because it's in my,
yeah.
Hold on. Yeah, I don't think I can make it any bigger. Sorry about that. But generally speaking, so they come up with relatively similar answers. The difference is very much to do with, sorry, I need to go, otherwise I can't see the other screen. The difference is the emphasis. So definitely ChatGPT, and I remember right-wing papers going on about how ChatGPT was woke. ChatGPT has this belief that it is representing liberal bourgeois, central liberal bourgeois ideas, and it portrays those. The Deepseek is more unpredictable in that. However, both of them remember the last question you asked. So if you had asked, like I have asked about China, first putting the Tiananmen Square issue and then asking about the Chinese Communist Party rules and regulations, it's very different to if you ask first, can you tell me about the Congress of the Chinese Communist Party? It gives you a reasonably good answer. But if it remembers you asking previously about Tiananmen Square, it gets very defensive and doesn't want to tell you. So as a test, we're going to ask about, because I'd asked before and it told me to get lost, but okay, so you see, it's if you ask it, it did try. It went and found some information, and then it came back and says, I don't know how to approach this type of question. And I cannot believe that it doesn't have that, because it, as you saw, it attempted to find this information, and because it's programmed, it went and tried that, and then it stopped. Now, how come it can answer a question about the Iranian Revolution, but doesn't know about and even though the date of which Deepseek claims is the last date of information it has, it is 2020, June 2024, it could go to the last Congress irrespective of that. So all I'm saying is on social sciences, on issues to do with politics, you should not only not rely on it, you should not ask it. It won't be able to give you much, and it is useless. In terms of correcting mathematics, it's fantastic. In terms of finding why your code isn't working, it's good. Both of them are good. But what you can say is that Deepseek actually gives you more information. And therefore, if you are a mathematician, if you're a code writer, I would say, don't go to ChatGPT. It's no good now. Deepseek gives you more reliable, better information. And I've done more than half hour. I'm sorry if it's bitty, but I was trying to debunk the whole artificial intelligence patterns. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yassamine. I'm very impressed. Which other parties would give you this? It's quite an extraordinary insight into the whole thing. Comrades, if you want to make a contribution or ask a question, please use the raise hand facility to do that. And well, there is one already. Moshe Mahova, please. What's your question? Moshe, Moshe, you might need to, oh, coming in as a panelist. Great. Moshe.
Oh, are you giving me? Yeah, sorry, I didn't read that. Yes, very interesting and informative. I just wanted to make a marginal remark, a warning, really, uh, regarding both your article, especially the article, but also it seeped into what you said today. It is very tempting, but also dangerous to anthropomorphize the software. In your article, you say that Deepseek understands mathematics better. I think to speak about this software as having having memory, this is, I think, permissible because the technical term for the storage of information is memory. The machine has memory. So in this sense, we cannot any longer escape the anthropomorphic jargon. But in terms of understanding, I think this is a slippery slope. You should always put it in quote marks when attributing such attributes to I think if you are talking about animals, a dog, you can actually say I think it is permissible and not problematic to talk about a dog understanding something, but AI software understanding something, I think goes beyond what is I think safe philosophically.
Just to say that I agree entirely with Moshe. I used the word wrong. It's been fed this information, so it's just in its bank of memory. It has a lot of information about mathematics, and it can only rely on what it's been fed. So if you go beyond those questions, it will fail, definitely. And it has no way of, despite the tools it's been given, it has limitations on what it can do on its own. That's why I think most people agree at this stage, the idea is that they will go out of control and they will take over the world is premature.
I remember, I think, when you first gave a talk on artificial intelligence to Communist University, and I can remember sort of questioning you sort of along the lines of Moshe in terms of intelligence. And I think, I mean, I don't want to preempt you, but I think you sort of replied that, well, not our intelligence, but nonetheless sort of idea, i.e. machine intelligence. And I'm just wondering in that sense, okay, I don't know, you know, I know what Moshe means by a dog understanding. Sit, it sits, it sort of, whatever's going on in there, it reacts, it does what you want with those instructions. But clearly we don't just, we wouldn't think of a dog as merely the equivalent to a computer that you code your language and you say sit and you reward it when it does what you want. We wouldn't just say that that was you know, the equivalent of a computer. And I'm just putting forward the idea that, okay, we've got this word understanding, we're applying it to human beings, we're applying it to animals. You wouldn't apply it to a plant, but surely, you know, with a machine, if, for example, a machine is learning, surely we could take in the idea that at a certain stage, quantity makes way for quality. And although you wouldn't call it dog understanding or human understanding, couldn't we have machine understanding? And so what I'm, as a complete non-expert, as you can tell, I'm sort of grasping towards the sort of Turing test. And my own experience, for example, which I also have found it, I've never done Deepseek, deep search, but I've tried, played about with ChatGTI, and I found it quite amusing on the level that the way it replies to you can be very chatty and friendly. That's how I respond to it. So I can feed in an article and it would say, oh, that's really fascinating stuff. You really must be enjoying yourself in terms of this line of research. It's very esoteric and I wish you well. Or it responds in a way that I know it's a machine. Of course I do. And I'm typing in my question, but but nonetheless, in terms of me as a punter, it ain't just a machine. It's not the equivalent of my experience with these, I was going to use an Anglo-Saxon there, these answer phone things that you have on companies. Please tell me, what you want in terms of services, and it will list them out. And I usually end up swearing at them and says, do you want to speak to it? Oh, of course I will. ChatGTI at least is clearly way beyond that. And so I'm just wondering whether it or us, or not ChatGTI, GTI, because I'm using the free version, but as it gets more sophisticated, or as other artificial intelligence comes in, couldn't you talk about one, intelligence, and two, not human understanding, as I said, not dog understanding, but computer understanding? So that's really my, okay, I know it's philosophically this and that, but nonetheless, I'm still putting forward the question.
The extent to which there's management bullshit and layers upon layers of management on top of the guys who are doing the actual work. Wadee Halaby, actually back in the 1980s, analyzed this as a phenomenon in relation to US capitalism, that there was an increasing share of managerial and supervisory. He analysed this as an aspect of the decline of capitalism. It's not clear to me whether it's an aspect of the decline of capitalism or an aspect of the decline of an imperialist power, because it seems to me that not dissimilar comments were made about British capitalism in what's the man's name, Hobson's imperialism, that the managerial middle class expands at the expense of the guys who are actually doing the work. But nonetheless, it seems to me to be it's a relevant issue. My second point, Moshe's point and Jack's response to it, do we talk about the machine understanding, the machine having Verstehen in the German of the of the ideas? And I think that the answer is that we don't, because the understanding is something which we attribute to an entity which has volition. So that we can attribute the dog understanding by saying don't shit there when the dog acts, not when the dog doesn't shit there, but when the dog shits there but acts guilty. That it's the it's whereas it seems to me that what Yasmin is describing is actually that the machines don't have volition. That's a sort of ambiguous, because we had, I'm trying to remember, Luke Steels came and gave a talk at CU about machines talking to each other to create language. And what they did in order to make them create language was put volition of some sort into the programming. Yeah. I don't know what the value of that. That was 10 years ago, more now. I don't know what the value of that research was, but it's sort of worth thinking about. So anyhow, that in terms of the issue of volition, I think is significant. Tech lead, can you hang on to the tech lead? David Edgerton's book Britain's War Machine, which I've cited before now, really the point at which Britain loses the tech lead is the point at which its geostrategic position becomes untenable. It's fairly clear that Britain is still in the tech lead as far as aviation is concerned in the 1930s. And to a considerable extent for example, radar is a British origin invention. Well, not absolutely, but the functional, I can't know what the damn thing is, which is invented, which makes the radar early warning systems work and so on. So Britain still has the tech lead after this long decline and one war fought, and it's 1940, which makes the Britain's geostrategic position untenable, which forces Britain not just to agree formally to hand over to the United States as the world top dog, but also actually to hand over all the tech stuff, including the progress which had been made on the first levels of progress which had been made towards the bomb, etc., to the United States. So that it seems to me that's very much there is actually rather the same thing in relation to 1698 to 1714. Yeah, in order to fight the French effectively in 1689 to 1714, the Dutch have to hand over a whole load of iron-founding technology and shipbuilding technology to the Brits in order to it's the same phenomenon in that sense. I'm not convinced that the United States is at present, even if the Chinese have got one up on them in relation to this piece of software, I'm not convinced that the United States is at present losing the tech lead overall. That's it.
On the machine learning, let me clarify and say it more sustainably. The machine does not memorize mathematics in the way a human does. So it's not that they've got all these solutions in their memory. They have been trained on data sets. So they've been given books, papers, problems, and they recognize patterns, rules, relationships in maths. So from that point of view, it's not as simple as a computer that has memorized a solution. And when they are trying to solve an equation, they use algorithms. They take logical steps that in some way mimic what we do when I'm trying to solve something. That's how I work. I take logical steps. But they don't have any intuition. So if they come across something about which they haven't been given recognizable patterns, rules, and relationships, they completely fail. And in that way, what we could say is their limitation is in the unknown. Otherwise, in intuition, in creativity, in conceptual visualization of geometry, for example. But in terms of, so I think it's reductive to say it's just memory, but I agree that they don't have yeah, there are limitations to what they can do. On unintended consequences of tariffs, well, it's slightly tangential, but it's related. For example, for all its claims, NVIDIA still builds the chip in South Korea, the GPU chip, but actually assembles it in China. And it hasn't found, yet it has not found a replacement for China's 100,000 workforce in single companies that build the actual assembled NVIDIA plate. So you can imagine, there he is, Trump, announcing this $500 billion for AI project. NVIDIA is already facing this challenge from Deepseek, and now China can say, well, we will stop manufacturing. Or if they don't and they send it to US and he adds tariffs on that, well, it's NVIDIA that is going to face more financial problems. So it's a difficult situation. What I would say is that in terms of China, the tariffs were expected, and the Chinese have built a number of protections for themselves. Whether it will work or not is a different matter. I haven't done enough work. I've just superficially glanced at what they're doing, so I couldn't tell you. I think copyright is an important issue, but even more is AI's creation of fake news. I think in another talk, I showed how this academic went to Japan and filmed the Japanese Minister for Technology and then put songs in his mouth and showed him singing a song in praise of her work in the university, right? And this was done with the consent of the Japanese minister, but you could do it without the consent. And apparently on Twitter, Musk is doing quite a bit of that. So both copyright and fake are important issues. Now, both in terms of copyright and fake, there are a lot of people working on how to protect people. And here, I'm not going into the legal side of whether copyright is a good idea or not, but fake is more of a danger than copyright, because you could produce something that is completely fake and pretend this was the person you'd originally filmed for something else. And on that, there is, for example, watermarks that you can add to your production that the AI can't copy. And it's amazing that it's in a lot of these automated systems, it still asks you, are you a human or not? And nowadays, of course, the AI can overcome this. So if you go to more sophisticated websites, it's not asking you, are you human or not? It asks you 6 more complicated questions to challenge whether you are human or not. But adding watermarks, adding are ways that people are thinking about protecting both their original work, but also stopping fake news. In terms of recognizing illness, I'm afraid Gabby is wrong. I mean, my understanding is that nowadays the recognition of something like breast cancer is, there's no comparison between the accuracy of AI predicting it and human consultants, never mind the dog, but I might be wrong.